I'll never forget that night. The truck cabin felt like a tomb. The hum of the engine, the faint flicker of the dashboard lights, and the endless stretch of dark highway. I've been driving for years, but that night, something felt off. It wasn't just the rain coming down in sheets, making the road disappear beneath me. It was the feeling, that gut-sinking feeling that I wasn't alone out there. And trust me, when you've spent as much time on the road as I have, you learn to trust your gut. My name's Jake Miller, and I've been hauling freight across this country for the better part of 2 decades. I've seen my fair share of strange things on the road. Whether that could stop you dead in your tracks, trucks broken down on the side of nowhere, but nothing had prepared me for what was coming. I had just passed through the small town of Black Hollow. It was a sleepy little place. Nothing more than a couple of rundown diners and a gas station that didn't even bother to stay open past midnight. Just me, the truck, and the open road. That's how I liked it. The rain was coming down hard, the wipers barely keeping up, and the sky was dark. So dark it felt like the night was swallowing me whole. As I cruised down Route 66, I saw the headlights of another truck in the distance, way off in the rearview. At first, I thought it was just another trucker, another soul on the same endless stretch of asphalt. But as I watched the lights in my rearview mirror, something didn't feel right. They weren't getting closer. They were staying the same distance behind me, no matter how fast or slow I drove. For miles, they stayed there, unwavering, like a shadow that refused to leave. Started to get to me. Something was wrong. I could feel my pulse quicken, and my palms started to sweat, even though the cabin was freezing. I told myself it was just some trick of the mind, that I was just tired from the long haul. But then I saw it. A flicker. A brief flash of light that wasn't the truck's headlights, but something different. Something that shouldn't be there. I should have pulled over. I should have stopped right then and there. But the road was empty, and it was getting late, so I kept going. Then it happened. The truck behind me began to close the distance at an unnatural speed. Faster than any truck should have been able to go in the storm. It was right on my tail now, the lights glaring in my mirrors. I could feel the pressure mounting, as if the very weight of the truck was bearing down on me, pushing me forward. I slammed my foot down on the pedal, trying to put more distance between us, but it was like the truck was right there with me, matching my speed, inching closer. That's when I heard it. A knock, soft at first, then louder, almost a pounding, came from somewhere inside the truck, beneath the cabin. At first, I thought it was just the engine acting up, but then the knocks became rhythmic, deliberate. And I knew something was in the truck with me. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't dare look behind me again. Couldn't. The pounding beneath the floorboards was getting louder, more insistent. It sounded like something was trying to crawl its way up into the cabin with me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. The rain was still coming down in torrents, and the headlights of the truck behind me were blinding now, no longer just a faint glow in my rearview. They were directly on me, pressing me forward. I could feel the weight of the unseen driver's eyes on me, even though I didn't dare look. The knocking came again, louder this time. My foot hovered over the brake, but I couldn't bring myself to slow down. What if I stopped? What if I looked? I had no idea what waited for me outside the safety of the truck. I glanced down at the dashboard, my fingers trembling on the wheel. The temperature gauge was normal, the oil light off, everything seemed fine. But then why did I feel like I was being hunted? A sudden jolt shook the truck, and my heart skipped a beat. Something heavy had just slammed against the back of the trailer. I didn't even want to know what it was. I shot my gaze in the side mirror, nothing. The truck was still behind me, still too close, but there was no sign of anyone else. I heard the sound again, the knock, but this time it was coming from the cab, from behind me inside, the door to the sleeper berth. I froze. Who the hell was in the back? I was sure I'd locked up when I left the depot that morning. I'd been alone the whole trip. I told myself to stay calm. Maybe it was some kind of animal that had gotten in while I was filling up at the gas station. I had heard stories of raccoons or even coyotes getting into rigs, but this felt different. This was deliberate. Someone or something was trying to get in. I slammed my hand on the horn, trying to break the silence. The truck in the rear view didn't flinch. It didn't move an inch. But as I pressed harder on the gas, I saw something flash in the corner of my eye. A figure. It was standing at the side of the road. But the figure wasn't walking. It was dragging itself like it couldn't quite move its legs properly. I swear I saw its face. It was pale, with hollow, sunken eyes that seemed to follow me. Its lips were curled back in a grin, or was it a snarl? Couldn't tell. I quickly blinked, and when I looked again, it was gone. But the air inside the cabin felt colder. A biting chill seeped in, making me shiver despite the heat blasting from the vents. Suddenly, the truck behind me surged forward, as if it had gained some unnatural burst of speed. I could feel the engine of my rig groan under the strain, but I couldn't keep up. It was like the thing behind me wasn't even trying. Then the lights flickered. I slammed my foot on the brake. Too late. The truck hit me. The force of it sent my rig into a violent spin. I felt the trailer jerk, the tires screeching, and the world tilted sideways. For a second, I thought I was going to flip over, but somehow I managed to regain control, just enough to steer the truck back onto the road. Heart pounding, I glanced at the rearview mirror again. The truck was gone. Completely gone. Just the empty highway stretching out behind me. Rain still pouring down. The only sound the roar of my engine. I took a deep breath and wiped the sweat from my brow. It was over. But as I exhaled, something in the back of my truck shifted. It wasn't just a sound. No, this was worse. It was a feeling. Something was wrong. Something that didn't belong. I was no longer alone. I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. My hands were shaking so badly on the steering wheel, I had to force myself to focus on the road ahead. The truck was gone. But that feeling, it didn't go away. If anything, it was worse now. My mind raced with questions. Was it some kind of prank? Maybe someone else had been out there, messing with me? But no, this wasn't a prank. This was something far worse. The temperature inside the truck dropped again, and I could see my breath fogging in front of me. My truck's heater was blasting at full force, but it was like the cold had seeped inside, like it had taken root in the very air. The knocking came again. First, it was faint, a soft thud from the back of the rig. But this time, it wasn't under the truck. It was in the cab, and this time it was coming from above. I didn't need to look. I didn't want to look. I could feel it. Something was crawling along the roof of the truck. It was slow, methodical, like it was waiting for the right moment to drop down on me. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it might burst. I gripped the wheel tighter, fighting the urge to look up. The feeling of something watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake, was overwhelming. It was as if the truck itself had become a prison, and whatever was out there, it was inside with me now. The cabin lights flickered once, then twice before going out completely. My headlights illuminated nothing but endless darkness. I should have pulled over. I should have called for help, but I knew no one would be there. The nearest truck stop was over 30 miles away, and it felt like the storm had swallowed up the world around me. And then it happened. The figure reappeared, in the corner of my vision, just outside the driver's side window. At first, I thought it was another trick of the light, something my tired mind had conjured up. But it was real. A shadow moving, crawling, dragging itself along the side of the truck, its face pressed up against the glass. Its eyes were wide, unblinking and hollow, like black pits sucking in the light. I slammed my foot on the gas, desperate to outrun whatever this thing was, but it was already there, right next to me, its hand. The hand that was far too large for any human, reaching up to the window. I swerved to the right, narrowly avoiding a tree that seemed to pop out of nowhere, my truck fishtailing across the road. The thing was still beside me, still following me, its fingers scraping against the window, leaving deep, gnarled marks in the glass. Couldn't breathe. My vision was going blurry, my hands numb with fear. I looked back at the rearview mirror. Nothing. The truck that had been chasing me was gone. The lights that had been blinding me were now just a distant memory. But the figure was still there. Closer. It was on the side of the truck now, crawling, no, dragging itself up towards the front. I could hear its ragged breaths, sharp and wet, against the metal of the cabin. The window was still up, but I could feel its breath fogging the glass from the outside. The smell, oh God, the smell. It was like rotten meat, like something had been decaying for days. And then it spoke, not in words, but in something worse. It was a sound, a low, guttural growl that shook my bones, something primal and ancient, as if it was calling to something, calling me. In that moment, I knew I wasn't going to make it out of there. I could feel it. I could feel the weight of it, the thing that had been following me, getting closer, pressing in on all sides. My eyes darted around the truck, desperately searching for any way out. The door? Locked. The windows? Rolled up tight. But then, just as quickly as it started, everything stopped. The truck behind me was gone. The thing outside was gone. The temperature in the cabin returned to normal. The lights flickered back on, and the storm seemed to subside. I don't know what happened. Maybe I passed out. Maybe it was all in my head. But when I looked back at the road, everything seemed normal. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the highway stretched out ahead of me, as empty and silent as it had been before. But deep down, I knew better. That thing, whatever it was still out there. And it was waiting for me to slip up. It was waiting for me to stop running. I didn't stop. Not once. I drove straight through the night, until I finally reached a truck stop at dawn, too terrified to even look behind me. To this day, I don't know what I saw that night, but I've never forgotten the feeling of being hunted, of being watched by something that's not quite human. And that's why I'm telling you this story, because I'm still out there. And that thing is still waiting for me. I thought that after I reached the truck stop, I'd be able to breathe again. But as soon as I pulled into the lot, the feeling didn't leave. It was like a shadow had clung to me, hanging over me, waiting for me to let my guard down. I parked the rig and sat there for a moment, hands still trembling, my body stiff with fear. I couldn't bring myself to get out of the truck. The lights of the stop were flickering like they always do at places this rundown, but they felt like they were mocking me, reminding me that whatever had happened last night, it wasn't done with me yet. I didn't sleep. Not that night, not the next night, and not for days after that. I would nod off in the driver's seat and wake up with that cold chill creeping over me again. But I had to keep going. I had loads to deliver, and I couldn't afford to stay put for long. It was on the third night after the encounter that things started happening again. I was cruising down a stretch of Route 66, another desolate, empty road, and that damn feeling came back, like a gnawing hunger in my chest. I kept checking the rear view, half expecting to see headlights in the distance, but there was nothing. Just the long, dark road, stretching ahead of me like it had before. Then the lights flickered in the cab. I wasn't alone anymore. A voice, soft and barely audible, came through the static of the radio. It wasn't clear, but it was unmistakable. A voice, rough and hoarse, like it hadn't spoken in years. "You can't escape. You're not alone. Not anymore." I slammed the radio off, but the voice didn't stop. It echoed in my head, repeating those same words. I had to pull over. I had no choice. My stomach twisted with dread, and my hands were slick with sweat. The truck lurched as I made an abrupt turn onto a dirt road. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I couldn't be on that highway anymore. I pulled over to the side of the road, the truck engine idling, the air thick with silence. I opened the door and stepped outside, my boots sinking into the damp ground. The night was cold, the moon barely visible behind thick clouds. I scanned the area. No other vehicles, no lights. Felt wrong. Everything about this place felt wrong. I wasn't sure why I got out. Maybe it was that voice. Maybe it was the feeling that if I didn't do something, something worse would happen. And that's when I saw it. A figure, standing at the edge of the road, barely visible in the darkness. A tall, thin shape, its limbs unnaturally long, like it didn't belong in the world of flesh and bone. It was staring right at me. Its eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, seemed to glimmer in the night, like they were reflecting something that shouldn't be. I froze. The voice came again, this time louder, clearer, as if it was right next to me, as if it was inside my head. "You can't run from me. I'm always here. I'm always watching." I turned to run, but the figure was faster. It moved impossibly quick, covering the distance between us in what felt like seconds. The air grew colder as it approached, and I felt my body lock up with fear, like I couldn't move even if I tried. It was right in front of me now, its face inches from mine. The smell, it was unbearable. Rotten flesh, mold, something worse than death. Its breath was hot on my skin, like the breath of a corpse, foul and sickening. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but my voice wouldn't work. And then I heard something else. Behind me, a low growl, a rumbling sound like an animal, but not quite. Something was circling me. I glanced around quickly, my heart pounding, and saw it. Another figure, just like the first, crawling on all fours, dragging itself through the mud. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dark, its jaw slack, hanging open as if it had been ripped apart and put back together wrong. "You can't escape," the voice whispered again. "We are always here, watching, waiting." I wasn't sure what happened next. One moment, I was standing there, frozen, and the next, I was back in the truck, slamming the door shut, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the keys. The engine roared to life as I gunned the gas, tearing down the road, my tires kicking up dirt and rocks in my wake. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The road stretched on, endless and dark, but I didn't feel safe. Not anymore. I knew they were out there, following me, waiting for me to slip up. I drove through the night, and when the sun finally began to rise, when the first light of dawn broke through the horizon, I thought for a moment that I was free. But then I looked in the rearview, and there they were, the figures, standing at the edge of the road, just watching, waiting, couldn't breathe. The figures in the rearview mirror were still there, standing motionless at the side of the road. My pulse was a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I tried to focus, tried to stay calm, but the air inside the cab was thick with dread, pressing down on my chest like an invisible weight. I kept driving, my foot glued to the gas pedal, the truck engine roaring as I tore down the highway, every mile feeling like it could be my last. The road stretched endlessly ahead, but no matter how fast I went, no matter how far I pushed the rig, those figures were always there, watching, waiting. I couldn't escape them. They were everywhere. The temperature dropped again, the cold creeping back into the cabin, seeping through the walls like it had before. I glanced at the dashboard. The temperature gauge was fine, but it felt like I was driving through an ice storm. My breath fogged up the windshield as if the night had swallowed the warmth of the truck. I reached for the radio, but the static was back. That low, guttural growl hummed through the speakers, vibrating the metal of the truck. Then the voice. "You can't hide from us, Jake. We've been with you all along. You're one of us now." I slammed the radio off, but it didn't stop. It didn't matter. The voice was inside my head now. The feeling, that gnawing presence, was all around me. I couldn't escape it. Then something shifted. The road in front of me began to distort, like the very ground beneath the tires was warping, stretching, pulling away from the rig. The lights flickered again, and this time they didn't come back on. I was driving blind. The truck jerked to the side, and I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The road didn't exist anymore. The world around me twisted, like I was driving into some dark void where nothing made sense. The edges of reality were fraying, and I was losing control. I felt it then, the breath on my neck, hot, rancid, like death itself was breathing down my spine. I turned to look, but there was nothing there. No one behind me, but the air, it felt thick, oppressive, like something was inside the truck with me, something that wasn't supposed to be. "You're not alone, Jake," the voice whispered, soft and cruel, directly in my ear now, like it had been standing next to me all this time. I couldn't take it anymore. I threw the truck into park, ripped the keys from the ignition, and scrambled out of the rig. The road beneath my boots felt wrong, like it wasn't real, like I was walking on something that wasn't meant to exist. My breath was shallow, my body shaking with terror. I stumbled, nearly falling, and when I looked up, I saw them again. The figures. They were there, surrounding me, slowly closing in, their twisted, contorted bodies moving in jerky, unnatural ways. Their eyes, those soulless, empty eyes, never left me. They were just watching. But there was something different this time. One of them stepped forward. It was tall, too tall for a man. Its limbs unnaturally long, bent in ways they shouldn't have been able to. Its mouth stretched open impossibly wide, revealing teeth that seemed to go on forever, rows upon rows of jagged, blackened teeth. It grinned, or at least I think it was a grin, but it looked more like a twisted, gaping wound that couldn't be sealed. The growl in my head intensified, but this time, it wasn't just in my mind. The sound was real. It was coming from everywhere. The ground beneath me vibrated with it, shaking the very air. The figures took a step closer, moving as one, like they were part of some dark, twisted collective, drawn to me by some unseen force. And then it spoke. "You can't leave. You belong to us now. Forever." I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. My body felt frozen in place, as if the very ground beneath me had grabbed hold of me and wouldn't let go. The figure reached out, its long, skeletal hand brushing against my cheek. I felt the cold touch, the deadness, seeping into my skin. I gasped for air, but none came. The world was closing in around me, the darkness pressing in from all sides. And then everything went black. I don't remember what happened after that. The next thing I knew, I woke up in the cab of my truck. The engine was off, the lights were back on, and the road was empty just like it had been before. But I knew it wasn't over. Whatever happened that night, whatever those things were, they didn't just let me go. They were still with me, the shadows that followed, the voices that whispered in the back of my mind, the feeling that I was never truly alone. I've been driving since that night, always on edge, always waiting for them to show up again. And I know they will, because they never really leave. I tried to convince myself that it was just a bad dream, the kind that you have after working too many long hours on the road, when the mind starts to play tricks. But the thing is, I knew it wasn't. I knew it had been real. The air had felt too thick, too heavy, the figures too close, and that feeling, that gut-wrenching, suffocating feeling, it was still with me. I tried to go back to normal, but I couldn't shake it. The voices in my head weren't just nightmares anymore. They were constant whispers, soft, like they were just behind me, waiting for me to slip up, to make a mistake. Every time I started the engine, every time I shifted gears, it was there. I thought about quitting. I thought about leaving the road for good, maybe going home to my family, finding a safer job. But every time I turned off the engine, that's when it got worse. I had to keep moving. The road was the only thing that kept me from completely losing it. It had been 2 weeks since the night of the figures, and I was driving through Nevada, on the same stretch of highway I'd driven countless times before. But tonight, something was different. The sky was blacker than I'd ever seen it, and the stars, which normally lit up the night like scattered diamonds, were hidden behind thick clouds. I should have felt relief at the absence of the eerie figures, the watching eyes, but I couldn't. The truck's headlights illuminated the road ahead, but everything seemed off. The landscape was distorted, like it was trying to hide something from me. The shadows on the side of the road seemed too long, like they were stretching out, reaching for me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure, standing by the side of the road. It was taller than the others. Its shape was wrong, too tall, too thin, like it was bending reality itself. I glanced quickly at the rearview mirror. Nothing, just the empty highway behind me. I took a deep breath. No, I couldn't let myself get caught up in it again. It was just my mind playing tricks. But when I looked back, it was closer. I slammed my foot down on the gas. The truck roared to life, but the figure kept pace. It was right there, just on the edge of my vision, its shape moving in ways that were impossible. It wasn't walking. It was gliding, sliding across the road with an eerie grace. "You can't outrun us, Jake." The voice came again, a soft whisper in the back of my mind, but it felt like it was speaking from inside the truck itself. "You're not getting away." I didn't care anymore. Couldn't care. I floored the pedal, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly that my fingers went numb. The truck lurched forward, the engine screaming, but it wasn't enough. The figure was still there. It was inside the truck. I didn't hear it enter. I didn't see the door open, but I felt it. The air shifted, and that same suffocating cold wrapped around me like a blanket, clinging to my skin, sinking into my bones. I could feel the presence next to me. It was close, so close that I thought it might be sitting in the passenger seat. I dared not look. Couldn't. "You belong to us," the voice rasped, its breath hot on the side of my neck. Couldn't take it. Couldn't breathe. The truck was speeding faster than I ever thought possible. But no matter how fast I went, it was still there, pulling me deeper into whatever nightmare this had become. And then I saw it. A shadow. A massive, towering shadow that covered the road ahead, blocking out the headlights. It wasn't just a shadow, it was alive. It moved, shifting and twisting like it had a life of its own, its form constantly changing, its edges impossible to focus on. It was too big, too unnatural, something that shouldn't exist. I slammed on the brakes, but the road kept going. The figure reached forward, its arms elongating unnaturally, stretching toward me with an inhuman speed. I jerked the wheel to the right, veering off the road into the desert, the truck crashing through the dry earth, tearing through rocks and dirt. I thought I'd lost control. I thought this was it. But when I looked up, the figure was gone. The air was still. The engine was silent. I was alone, but I knew better than to think I was safe. I knew what I had seen. The presence was still with me. It was watching me, waiting for me to slip again. Because once it has you, there's no getting away. I've been driving ever since, trying to outrun something that isn't bound by the road, by the distance, by time. The figures are always there, just out of reach. They follow me, they wait, they whisper, and I know, deep down, that no matter how far I go, no matter how fast I drive, it will always be with me. They'll always be with me. I thought it was over. I thought that maybe, just maybe, after all that had happened, I could move on. But you can't outrun something that has no need for roads or time. I kept driving day after day, and the truck never stopped. Neither did they. There's no peace on the road anymore, no safety. Every town I pass, every truck stop I pull into, feels like a trap. It's like the road itself has become a hunting ground, and I'm the prey. The worst part? I can't be sure whether I'm awake or still trapped in that nightmare. Because sometimes when I blink, when I lose focus for just a second, I see them, at the edge of the road, watching. Sometimes they move in the shadows. Sometimes I hear their distorted breathing. They're never close enough to touch, but they don't need to be. They don't need to be. It's always the same. A shift in the air. The temperature drops. That feeling of someone or something just behind me. The whispers in my head, always closer, always clearer. "You belong to us now, Jake. We never let go. I can't escape them. They're not bound by distance, by time. They don't need to follow the rules. They've already taken everything. My sleep, my peace, my sanity. And every time I think I've outrun them, they catch up. They always catch up. The last time I stopped was in a tiny little town in Arizona. It was late, and I was exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open as I drove through the deserted streets. The headlights cast long shadows over the empty sidewalks. The neon lights of a small diner flickered, offering a strange comfort in the dark. I pulled into the parking lot, hoping for a few hours of rest. I didn't care if the place looked run down. I didn't care about anything except getting off the road for a little while. But as I walked into the diner, it felt wrong. The air inside was thick, stale, and heavy, like it hadn't been touched in years. The woman behind the counter didn't speak when I sat down. Her eyes were wide, almost frantic, like she had been waiting for me. I ordered coffee, my hands trembling as I held the cup. It was the first time in a long time I felt like I might be safe, like I might find some sliver of normal again. And then I heard it. A soft knock. It came from the window, followed by the faintest scraping sound, like nails against glass. I froze, my heart stopping in my chest. I knew what it was before I even turned to look. A figure, a shape at the edge of the window, just standing there watching. I stood up so fast, the chair clattering behind me. The diner door slammed open, and I rushed outside, my breath ragged, my mind screaming at me to run. But as I turned toward the truck, I saw the shadow. It was standing next to my rig, a dark shape moving unnaturally, gliding along the side of the trailer, its long arms dragging the ground. I stumbled back, my legs giving way beneath me. That cold air surrounded me again, like it was crawling under my skin. The thing was waiting, watching. I had to go. I had no choice. But as I turned to run, something grabbed me. A hand, cold as death, gripped my wrist, pulling me back. I didn't even have the chance to scream. I was dragged back toward the diner, toward the figure that seemed to loom out of the shadows, smiling with a grin that stretched too wide to be human. And that's when I realized, there's no way out. There never was. They were always there, watching, waiting, trapping me in an endless loop of fear, of darkness, of death. Because once you see them, once they know you, you're theirs. Forever. I thought I knew what fear was before that night. I thought I had encountered terror on the road, the kind that came with dark stretches of highway and the occasional odd sound in the night. But I was wrong. The true horror isn't the unknown. It's knowing that the nightmare is real. Knowing that you're not just being hunted, but that you've already been caught. I don't know how long I've been driving now. Weeks? Months? Time has lost all meaning. There's no day or night. No sunrise or sunset. Just the endless, looping highway stretching ahead of me, each mile more familiar than the last. But the figures are always with me. It started with them watching from the shadows, from the side of the road. Then they grew bolder. They began to appear in my mirrors. Just a flicker, a shadow darting across my reflection, always just out of reach. I could never quite get a clear look at them. I could never see what they really were. But I knew they weren't human. I knew that whatever they were made to be seen only by those who were marked. Those who had crossed a line they could never uncross. And now it's worse. The whispers have grown louder. Sometimes they're not even whispers anymore. They're clear words, spoken right behind me, in my ear. I don't know if it's in my head or if it's real, but I don't dare turn around to find out. I can feel their presence every second. Every time I blink. Every time I take a breath. I've tried to stop, tried to park the rig somewhere and call for help, but no matter where I go, they're there. I've even tried to sleep, to rest for just a few hours, but the nightmares are worse than being awake. Last night, I thought I finally saw the truth. I had stopped at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place where the lights barely work and the air smells like old diesel and burnt coffee. It was late and I was exhausted. I hadn't been able to think straight for days, and I needed rest, just a few hours of peace. I parked next to a diner that had the flickering neon sign and a pair of empty swings on the front porch. Everything was still, except for the occasional gust of wind that rattled the windows of the rig. I was about to climb into the sleeper berth when I saw it. A figure standing just outside my truck. It wasn't standing still, though. It was moving, crawling along the ground, dragging itself toward me, its head jerking unnaturally with every step. It was too big, too tall. Its limbs stretched in strange, grotesque angles. I could see its face in the dim light, a pale, hollow mask that looked like it had been stitched together from shadows. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The figure stopped moving, and then, as if it had sensed me watching, it turned its head. Its eyes, those black, empty eyes, locked onto mine. And that's when I understood. They weren't following me because I was special. They weren't chasing me because I had somehow been chosen. No, the truth is worse than that. They were following me because I had already been claimed. I can't explain it, how or why, but I know now that when you see them, when they come for you, it's not about survival anymore. It's about paying the price. The price for whatever it was that they took from you. Whatever it was they decided they wanted in exchange for your soul. And me? I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. I'm a part of this. I'm a part of their world, the world that exists on the other side of the road, the one you can't see unless you're marked. When I closed my eyes that night, I felt it. A hand on my shoulder. Cold. Dead. I'm still here. Still driving. But I know that no matter how far I go, no matter how fast I drive, I'm never truly alone. I'm never truly safe. I'm theirs. Forever. I thought I could outrun them. I thought I could keep driving, keep moving, and eventually, I'd get far enough away that I'd lose them. I thought I could shake the shadows off my tail and find some peace. But that was a lie. I've been on this road for so long now, I've forgotten what it's like to feel safe. The figures, they're always there. Always watching. Always waiting. I've tried to fight them. I've tried to reason with them. But you can't fight something that doesn't play by the rules of this world. I've learned something over the past few months. I've learned that the road isn't just a place. It's a path. A path to something darker, something that we, those of us who drive, who live in these endless hours of solitude, can never understand. Last night, I made my final stop. It wasn't planned, it wasn't expected, but I knew it was time. The weight in my chest, the suffocating presence in the air, it was too much to ignore. I pulled off the highway, onto a dirt road I'd never seen before, and the truck felt heavy beneath me. The engine sputtered, the lights flickered, and the night closed in on me like a blanket. I didn't fight it. I knew what was coming. I stepped out of the truck, my legs shaking, the cold biting through my jacket. There was no sign of life. No streetlights, no gas stations, no other cars. Just the road stretching into the blackness ahead. And there they were. Not just one figure this time. Not just two. There were dozens. They stood in a circle, their faces obscured by shadows, their bodies twisted and contorted in unnatural ways. They didn't move at first, just stood there, waiting for me. The whispers were deafening now. They filled my head, clawing at my thoughts, each voice more desperate than the last. You are ours. You cannot run. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My voice was gone. My legs wouldn't move. I was frozen, paralyzed, caught in the web they had spun around me. I knew now that there was no escape. They were never after my truck, never after the road. They were after me. And when you're marked, there's only one way it ends. One of the figures stepped forward. It was taller than the others, its limbs stretching out unnaturally, its hands almost touching the ground. It reached toward me, and I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, the chill of death creeping into my skin. The air thickened, and for the first time in a long time I understood. They didn't want me to die. They wanted me to stay with them, to be one of them, forever. The figure's hand brushed against my cheek, cold as ice. I felt it sink deep, deep into me, as if its very essence was seeping into my soul. I could see the road behind them now, the highway stretching out beyond the figures. But it wasn't the road I recognized. It was twisted, bent, a path that led somewhere far darker than anything I could have imagined. You belong here now, the voice rasped, 1,000 voices whispering in unison. I felt myself being pulled into the shadows. The road was gone. The truck was gone. I was no longer driving. I was no longer in the world I knew. I was part of it now, part of the endless road, part of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface. I know what you're thinking. You think you can drive away, that you can leave all of this behind. But trust me, if you've seen them, if you've felt their cold touch, there's no running. Once you're marked, once they've taken you, you're theirs. Forever.